Hi guys, thanks so much for clicking on this video. I just wanted to pop in and quickly say hi because I was watching the introduction that I did for Jesse and I's Q&A that I forgot to include in the last video, and I just was so nervous at the beginning of our conversation, so I just said a bunch of things that I stumbled over myself a bunch of times and I'm too embarrassed to put it out there, so I thought I'd film a different one. Although I appreciate rawness on YouTube, let's not waste anyone's time. So I'm just going to do it again, even though part 2 is already out and this is part 4. If you haven't watched parts 1 to 3, make sure you go watch them. Part 3 is now out on Jesse's channel as well. And in that one, we cover everything about section 1 and section 2 and a couple other things like sitting the GAMSAT multiple times. In this video, we're mostly talking about section 3, which is kind of Jesse's specialty, as he got 100 in section 3. If you don't know Jesse already, he is the up-and-coming GAMSAT YouTuber that we're all thanking for uploading videos. He's making some awesome content about pretty much everything in the GAMSAT. His section 3 content obviously is particularly sought after because he got such a great mark, but also he's a great guy and I've been really loving getting to know him through YouTube and stuff. So if you haven't subscribed to him already, make sure you go check out his channel, check out some of his content, and it will really help you with your GAMSAT prep. But other than that, I think now I've said all I need to say, and on to the video.
A hard time if your motion is still. Then he moves the things around because the lyrics is ill.
In terms of section 3 as well, Jesse, I mean, I personally want to really improve my section 3 score.
Yeah.
What are your, what do you think made you get 100? Aside from your experience as well with tutoring, obviously that would have helped, but what is it about your approach do you think that makes it unique?
I think the biggest thing was just structure. I think just having a structure that I would stick to. So I worked on quotas more than anything, rather than time. I didn't really I knew that time was not a good measure because I could sit there with my head on the desk for an hour and call it a day and not have done anything. So always doing timed questions. And I spent a lot of time, and again, this kind of blends with being a tutor. When I talk about analyzing ASA material, and it's become I say to my students as well, it's become like a buzzword almost of this idea of analyze the ASA material, study reflectively. But I think what it really means is not just understanding how to get that question right, because in my mind I knew the reality is they're not going to ask me that question, and then they did in the end anyway. There were a few in there that were like, oh, okay, so that's something I learned. But so every time I got stuck on a question, I'm very kind of pedantic when I make mistakes, very, very type A in that sense. Nope, I can't go any further until I understand how this works. And I'll do it 5-10 times in a row until I understand it fully and can do it backwards kind of thing. But then I wouldn't stop there. So I'd go, okay, now I know how that question works. But the reality is they're not going to ask me that question. So do I really know how the general topic works? Or do I know how they're putting their questions together? Or do I only know it in the sense of how to answer this specific question in a specific context? So once I understood that, then I would usually go backwards from their answers and look at the other options and then work out why did they put those other 3 options there? What was the mistake they wanted me to fall into at that point? And one of them might have been a mistake that I've made. Other ones might have been mistakes that I didn't consider. And even though it seems a bit counterintuitive because then you're focusing on what mistakes are there, then I can start to understand what kind of traps they're setting up in that way. So was it things like, did I miss a unit? Or was one of them based on missing a unit conversion? Or was it based on not being accurate enough with the calculation, with the maths estimation side of things? Or was it to do with a confusion in the wording? Maybe it was, misappropriating a statistic to a word. And that's how you end up on answer B, which ends up wrong, and that kind of thing. And that then helped me understand a bit more of the patterns in the way that they put their answers together. So then I was thinking about then as I kind of built up that experience of, all right, what kind of errors are they creating commonly? What kind of trends do they have? Then I was better able to anticipate what trickery they had in the question when I was reading through it. And then from there, and this is where my tutoring experience probably comes in, then I would start chopping up the question and making alternatives from the information given. So I would realize, they didn't really use that formula much. I'm going to see what I can do with that. So if it was something about say dimensional analysis, I'd go, all right, they asked me for the dimensions of this unit, or this variable? What if they asked for this other one? Can I repeat the process and adapt it? Does it still work? So I really wanted to learn, like, can I condense down the stuff that I need to know that works for many questions, rather than trying to wrangle hundreds and hundreds of different individual specific questions with a specific strategy for each. That was pretty much where my study went. And then in terms of like processing questions, I know like my time management went really well. So like in my actual study, I was doing all timed practice, and then towards the end, I was doing it at twice, like 2 times pace. So when I was doing my timed full length exams, I was actually sitting section 3 I was giving myself an hour and 20 minutes, I think, from memory. And I was like, you got to do 75 questions in an hour and 20 minutes and just work at that kind of pace. So I was recycling the ACER questions at that point that I was using, but I'd given myself about 3 months gap where I was doing some other stuff. So I lost some of the details. So I went to adjust for that, and just to kind of really focus on my timing, I'm going to go at 2 times pace, so that then when I go into the exam, I'm confident that I can work faster if I need to. That was pretty much the idea behind it.
Wow.
So that worked very well. I'm not saying that people necessarily have to do 2 times pace, but it was just like a safety net for me.
Yeah.
And then processing the information, what I'm normally doing is just like reading the STEM, working out first if it's a biochemistry or physics question or just a maths question. And it might be a hybrid of them, but usually you can identify that. So then I'm kind of condensing down what information is relevant, so I'm not having to deal with everything at one time. Then as I'm going through the STEM, I'm usually like summarizing just like key relationships that I'm anticipating might be important. So a mathematical relationship or a definition of a word that's going to confuse me, and I'll put those down in the notes. And as I'm going, I'm kind of working out like what questions they could start asking. Could there be a dimensional analysis question, or are they going to ask me a qualitative analysis question, which is really common in biology, that kind of thing. So I'm already starting to pre-plan what strategies or experience might be helpful to me. And so then when I'm going to the question, then I'm starting to work out, all right, which alternatives are now actually relevant at that point. So I'm kind of compartmentalizing the information as I go. And I realized that prevented me from having to like search too much. Like I kind of then had a bit of an idea of where the questions were going to go before I'd read them. And then when I got into the questions, it was either, yep, I've already considered that, let's go. Or it's, no, that one's brand new, I didn't consider that. But then I wouldn't have to be searching quite as much for every single question in the STEM.
Wow.
And then I just kind of repeated that process for 75 questions in a row.
I mean, it's no wonder you got 100 then. I mean,
definitely an overthinker.
Yeah, but it paid off. I feel like that makes me think like that sounds like a lot of brain work, not only in the preparation of it, but in the moment of the test. Like you sorting through questions and figuring out, like going beyond the kind of expected, which obviously helped you. It's hard to do in the moment, you know?
Yeah. And I think that was why so much of my practice was timed conditions, because I wanted to know that I could just like switch it on, because I knew it was going to be after the break, which I always found difficult. Like section 1 and 2, it's like you're already amped up because the whole thing's about to start. After the break, you're tired and you've had a bit of a chance to sit down and relax and get away from it. You have to switch gears again. So all of my study was all about like, can I just like switch it back on again and still just immediately be attentive to small details?
Do you think that comes from preparation, being able to think ahead and you being so familiar with the types of questions?
Yeah, I think it was that. Like definitely like a big part of it was, am I familiar with this? And so there was a lot in there where I was like, okay, this feels either the same or just really like a close neighbor to what I've already done in a way. So that helped kind of quell any kind of nerves as well. Because I think back to like when I was sitting in my undergrad, and I remember like just rushing the last 15 questions in that sitting, like, all right, time's out. And even when I was going through it, it always felt like a scramble. Like it was kind of like, I think I've got it, but I'm not 100% sure. And I'm not totally comfortable with the information given. That's kind of how I feel with section 1. It's that kind of thing where I'm like, I've found some evidence for some of them, but I'm not 100% with everything here, but I have to keep moving. I wanted section 3 to just feel like a normal test. Like it was just like every question felt in control. So a lot of that was down to the timing. Yeah.
Wow. I think the whole in control thing I cannot relate to, but I sure will be trying for it.
Yeah, you can absolutely do it. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
you had a question for me of how do I bump my score from 62 specifically by 10 points.
Yes.
So I saw in your video that's roughly you're aiming to bump it by 10, right?
Attempting.
Without knowing too much about how you prepared for section 3 and without repeating any advice that I've already given, even if because you've probably already gone through all the ACER stuff, right?
Yeah.
At this point, yeah, I would still say it holds value, like to go back through them, especially because like I'm sure you haven't been looking at ACER section 3 in the meantime, right? So the details are going to drop a little bit, and there'll be questions like, my thing was the questions that are going to stuff me up are going to be the same ones that probably stuff me up in a few months' time, because I'm not going to remember the details all that well because I naturally was not comfortable with them. You know, the ones that are easy, you'll probably remember them because you got them right. The thinking was right. So realistically, the important questions are the ones that are going to stump you. And so you may as well redo them again. Yeah. And then, yeah, I would say the biggest thing is just going, like pouring over those PDFs. The amount of times I just reopened those PDFs again and again after I'd done the questions and was like happy to say I'm not going to be resitting them again. I was like, all right, just go back, go over it again, see if you can pick something else out. So I just kept scanning back over the same questions on a different day, where I was like, maybe I'm going to look at it differently and see something else. And you just keep drawing out information from it, which I know is kind of vague instruction. It's such a frustrating thing because I wish that I could do it, but then I can't put ACER questions on the screen and be like, here, because they'll pull me for copyright. But
no, it's good. I definitely haven't done that. Like my approach obviously was hoping for the best. And although I heard people saying, you know, like make sure you try and focus on the things that you got wrong and stuff, I think like I definitely could personally spend a bit more time just like actually getting to the bottom of them rather than kind of accepting that, oh, didn't do really well on that one, didn't really know what was going on there, but moving on anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good tip.
Yeah. And I think if you haven't already seen in one of my others, you said you've been watching some of them for prep, so this might be repeating, but for anyone who's watching that hasn't seen it, like the other thing that I would do is do skill sheets every time. So anytime I found that there was a particular topic that was catching me out, then I would just Google like worksheets for it. And I would just Google the topic, worksheet, PDF, and you can always find like some uni, it could be American or this or that. So every now and then you get notational differences, but for the most part, it's all the same. And I would just find a university level worksheet that was not GAMSAT style. And I would just drill the skill until I was 100% comfortable with it. And then I would come back and then redo the question. And I'd redo the same question and I would see if I can look at it differently. Because then it might just be about me being comfortable with the information at that point. And so even though that was like needle in a haystack kind of thing, like sometimes I was like, am I wasting my time here? My thinking behind it was that one, if that does come up again, then I'm 100% prepared. And if not, all I'm doing is just training myself to think in a different way when I come back to the question as well. So everything that I did, it was like I had to find a positive in it, even if it was something that was mildly time wasting or a little bit too minute, because I just wanted to know that everything I was doing was for the right reasons. And I just tried to avoid any of that kind of negativity, because that for sure was coming in all the time. Like, you're wasting your time, or this is not going to work. You're focusing on the wrong things and you're wasting your prep time and all the rest of it. But you just have to push that out and focus on what's actually going to be helpful to you. Yeah.
I think that's a good tip. We had another question as well about like dealing with negativity. I think it was from one of you guys. Well, it's kind of to do with this, but it's more to do with getting into medicine. So how do you get yourself out of this spiral of negative thinking about your chances of getting into medicine?
Yeah.
Fun.
That's a heavy question. It's real, like, for sure. I think everybody, whether they want to admit it or not, experience, like, I'm sure you probably going through the process for March were like, what am I doing? And you just start assuming that you're just not good enough for it.
100%. Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what you're aiming for. Like, obviously everyone's going in with different expectations of themselves or different goals in mind in terms of scores or all the rest of it. And I don't think it really matters what it is. There's going to be doubt that comes into it.
Yeah.
For me, like, it was like, I try to stay very practical with the way that I look at things. So it's like, if it's not helpful, don't bother with it, kind of thing. It's kind of like that thing of it, don't focus on trying to control things you can't control. With doubt, though, I feel like that is controllable, and it's all down to how you're viewing things. So the way that I looked at it was, if I've got those negative thoughts that are coming in, there's literally no benefit to keeping them there, because they don't improve my outlook. They make me feel worse. They don't improve my stress levels. They make it worse. And literally just not thinking about them, which I know is, again, a very vague instruction, but like just avoiding going into that kind of path is immediately a positive, because I'm avoiding the negative thought, and therefore I'm able to focus on what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
So if I'm able to control it in that way, where I can literally just kind of consciously push it out and just go, nope, don't listen to that, because that will go down that'll snowball into something a whole lot worse, then I would do that. But if it was where it was like persistent, and I had that where it's like I couldn't shake the doubt of I'm way in over my head trying to aim for the score that I was aiming for, especially because like I was going in with such a low GPA compared to what is considered competitive. That was playing on my mind, like knowing that I had to aim so high on the GAMSAT. It was like, no, that's not you. Like you're not gonna end up with that score. So whenever that was happening persistently, I would just put it down to the fact that I needed time away from it, and I would just not study as much that week, and I would just pretend like the whole application process wasn't happening, and I would just do something that actually made me happy. Like I would go for a run. That was a big one, because it's a good stress release as well. Or I would just I like work, so I would bury myself in my work. I wouldn't say that's necessarily always the most positive or practical thing to do, because sometimes that can be an avoidance strategy. But I would just work out what would make me happy at the time, and I would just substitute GAMSAT study with that in the short term. And then it would only be a day or two, and then I'd feel like, okay, I'm ready to get back into it now. Cool. So yeah, so what about you? What would your advice be for this person who wants to know how to avoid negative thinking, the spiral of negative thinking?
Look, I'm a sucker for negative thinking.
Yeah, look, it's a tough one. I also just try and remind myself, you can do anything, if you put your mind to it. I really truly believe that. I think I've learned that in my experiences.
And I don't think medicine is a matter of intelligence. I think it's like truly about, yes, the work that you put in, but like how you approach things, the persistence that you have. If you're willing to do the hard stuff, like you were saying, work on this, like go take the extra mile and try and do the stuff that is going to make you uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. I think when I apply that to like the whole negative thinking thing about getting into medicine, I just feel like I can do anything, if I really try. And I think that really helps me get out of it, because it's like, also if it doesn't happen in the end, I'm sure I'll do something else great, and I'm sure it'll just end up like the way it's meant to be. And it is such a competitive thing. Like it's so competitive. And when I was getting into it, if I knew that, perhaps I would have chosen a different route. No, I wouldn't. But yeah, it is really competitive, but everybody else is also just like you. Like there are no superhumans that we know of, aside from in fantasy books. But I just feel like we're all like pretty made equal. Maybe some people have higher IQs, which could be an arbitrary number as well. But like I just think that like our chances are actually all equal. We are all just like humans with brains, with different experiences and different educational backgrounds and stuff. But yeah, I think we all have a pretty fair shot at getting into it if we try. Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe that's a bit too optimistic, but that's how I feel about it.
The way to look at it, because I see the same thing. Like it sounds very kind of cheesy and cliched, the idea of you can do anything, but it really is like you've learned it from your experience. Like I've learned the same thing, that like I'm not someone who was like, I wasn't like a overachiever or anything, or I wasn't like, how do I put it? Like I did well in VC, but nowhere near as well as what people often think. Like especially like my students, they all think that like, oh, this guy's a genius, just because I'm their tutor or something like that. Like all my high school students.
Yeah.
But and like really where I built most of my abilities to do something, or at least abilities that I'm proud of, has not actually happened in an academic setting whatsoever. Like I realized that I actually built way more ability in working and in like meeting people and doing things completely unacademic, like non-academic. And so when I came to the test, that was what I was taking with me. Like I was comparing myself immediately because that's natural to do that. I was like, man, I'm up against people who've got like perfect ATARs or have like aced their undergrad and have like perfect 7 GPAs. And I'm trying to compete with that. And that just wasn't my history. And then I kind of realized that like, that's not really made up my GAMSAT altogether. Like a lot of the skills that I'm using and trying to use are things that I've built in a unique way. And so that kind of just opened the playing field again, where I was like, wait a second, all this comparison is just a complete waste because everyone is coming at it with a completely different experience of academics, non-academics, like personal life, everything. And all of that factors in. So there's literally no reason why someone would be selected against. It just comes down to the effort you put in. Yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of like, I mean, we, like for UCID, you and I are both going for UCID, but they don't even have interviews anymore. So it's like anyone can get in if you do well in the GAMSAT. If you're going for other schools, even then, like it is in the end a matter of character and a matter of experience. And those things can be built. Yeah. So our chances of getting into medicine are, I think, directly proportional to our ability to
like obtain experiences, obtain character, and obtain like that work ethic that's necessary for it, that hopefully they'll be able to see for you embarking on 4 years of med school.
Hopefully so. And I mean, and it circles back to that thing of like sitting the GAMSAT multiple times. It starts to make sense why the average is 2 to 3 times, because for most people, that's probably where a lot of the relevant experience is coming from. Just sitting it that many times and just learning the process and taking the slow route to it, rather than acing it first time, even though, again, there's people that do that. It's a much more realistic way of dealing with the pressure of it, is just going, okay, I'm in it for the long haul then. And then if it comes faster, then it's just a bonus.
Exactly.
We're going to cut it there, guys. We've been talking for a while. I hope we answered a lot of your questions. If you have any more, feel free to comment them below and we can get to them. If you have any other questions for Jesse, feel free to ask. Otherwise, make sure you subscribe to his channel because he's going to continue putting out good content. Yeah, hope this helped. Hope you guys enjoyed, and
we'll catch you for another video soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be on, and we'll have to do it again.
Thanks, Jesse.
And thanks, guys. See you soon.
So girls, move it around. If you see your main dog